Welcome to the Love Letters to Our Bodies podcast. I'm your host, Gwendolyn Mitchell, founder and CEO of Moyo Institute and lifelong spiritual seeker and energy worker. Here for thoughtful conversations about health, healing, and happiness by, for, and about Black and African American women. Disclaimer, the Love Letters to Our Bodies podcast does not provide medical advice. The opinions, experiences, and insights shared are for informational purposes only. Nothing shared in this podcast is intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other healthcare provider. Don't disregard or delay seeking it because of what you've heard on this podcast. Thank you. Are you ready? Let's dive in. Welcome to Love Letters to Our Bodies, the conversations for, by, and about Black women on health, healing, and happiness. Today, I have with me Ebonie Michelle, who is the founder of Prowl the LAB. And we're going to get into that in just a few moments, and you'll hear all about what Ebonie is up to. But let me just start by telling you a little bit about her background. Ebonie Michelle was born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia, by her parents, Charles and Carol Lewis, and they instilled in their daughters the values of pride in identity, intentionality in actions, and honesty towards the community they serve. During her upbringing in Atlanta, Ebonie attended North Atlanta High School before being accepted to Hampton University in Virginia. Hampton is one of the historically Black colleges and universities. There she earned a Bachelor of Arts in Marketing Management, acquiring skills that continue to fuel her mission today. It was also at Hampton University where she met her husband, a steadfast supporter and inspiration since 1997. Ebonie furthered her education at Florida A&M University, another prestigious HBCU, studying at the Institute of Public Health within the College of Pharmaceutical Sciences. She earned her Master of Public Health in Behavioral Health and Education, and since earning her MPH, Ebonie has worked in breast cancer prevention, youth violence prevention, and professional development, as well as human resources training and development with a leading government agency in Chicago, Illinois. These experiences equipped her for the establishment of Prowl the LAB, one of her greatest professional achievements. However, Ebonie's proudest accomplishment is her family, including her husband and two beautiful children who inspire her to make the world a better place for future generations, especially her little ones. Welcome, Ebonie. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Gwen. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Wonderful, wonderful. So let's start with your journey. Tell me a little bit about your personal story, what your relationship was like with your body before you founded Prowl the LAB.
I have had a bit of a roller coaster, if you will, when it comes to my body. The one thing that I will say that I was blessed with was not just being raised in a house with a very strong, confident, and womanly and powerful woman that was my mother. But every summer, I also spent time with her mother who raised her to be who she was. So I say that that's important because it really did inform the way that I carry myself as a woman today. And it really informs the goals that I set for myself in terms of how I want to continue to develop. And, since the age of 9, my health journey really started with precocious puberty, which is having a cycle before you are 10 years of age. So I experienced that. And not too long after that was when I began having issues with adenomyosis, which is heavy bleeding, which can be a lot of pain. And then that turned into endometriosis, which is when there are plaques of skin that actually attach to your internal organs, many of most likely your reproductive organs. And if you do not get them removed, then it can cause a lot of pain, a lot of scarring. So after that, I was told that I wouldn't have babies, but I ended up being blessed with two beautiful babies. And after I had my son, though, I noticed that I was having a lot of issues and I got really sick. So, about 3 months after he was born, I was diagnosed with lupus, then fibromyalgia, then Sjogren's. And I got pregnant again in 2016. And my daughter was born in 2017. And 3 years after she was born, I was diagnosed with bilateral breast cancer. And what that means is that not only did I have breast cancer on one side, but I had it on both sides at the same time, diagnosed, I want to say maybe weeks apart after going to my second opinion. So the reason why I detailed all of that is because those experiences had a direct impact on my relationship with my body. I can admit now, as I have begun to reflect upon my budding womanhood, that I often felt like my body betrayed me in a sense. I often felt as though my body was never good enough. It was never strong enough. Of course, when you're young, you always wonder if you're skinny enough, if you're fit enough, and how you look in your jeans. But for me, it was a deeper experience that my body was flawed, really internalizing that in a negative way played a huge role in how I carried myself as a young woman. And I often think back on the sadness. I think back on the, at times, aggression, the confusion, and just the loss of balance that I used to feel growing up because I always had this underlying knowledge that I wasn't normal. So that played a huge role in how I felt about myself and many of the missteps that I made in terms of building my confidence have impacted the way that I try to continually develop as a woman, especially as I'm raising a little girl myself.
Yeah. And, when we were talking off audio a little bit earlier, you
Mhm.
mentioned that one of the things that happened in your youth is that you were given birth control pills to deal with was it the excess bleeding or the pain
Mhm.
at a
Yes.
very, very young age. I'm, of course, not a physician, but
Mhm.
I'm venturing out to share my personal opinion based
Well,
on my own personal experiences. But I, wonder if that might not have contributed to some of the later issues that you had also in your body.
I don't know. I don't know if it did or if it didn't. But what I can say is that the way that they had me taking the birth control pills was so that I took it on a continuous cycle, except where you would have that week of your cycle. I just started a new pill pack, which prevented me from having a cycle. So I don't know if it did, but I will say this. It was so important at that particular point in time that I did begin to take the birth control pills because the pain began to really affect my quality of life. So being able to prevent those, and it was 7 to 10 days for me that I was having a cycle at such a young age with such a heavy flow and so much pain, even though I was extremely young when I had to start that protocol, I really try not to reflect upon that too minutely, simply because I know that it was necessary.
Okay.
I believe the right choice was made, but it's quite possible that having those artificial hormones pumped into my body every month, especially on a continuous basis, could have very well have played a role in everything that I've experienced since then.
Mhm. And I just want to acknowledge that I'm sure that as a child at 9 years old, that all of this was very, very difficult. And, I just want to acknowledge that and to acknowledge how you've moved forward in your life despite numerous challenges. So,
Thank you. I
yeah.
appreciate that. I appreciate that. I believe it all happens for a reason. It got me here with you today.
So you had a very, let's say, intimate experience of your body from a very early age with some challenges and overcoming those and finding ways to deal with those. So, you want to tell us a little bit more about how you got inspired to found the Prowl the LAB?
Well, Prowl the LAB developed in a roundabout way. I ran a youth development program or managed a youth development program in the south suburbs of Chicago for about 4 to 5 years. And it was really an amazing experience where I was able to train other adults to serve as mentors to youth over the summer. We had altogether, I want to say anywhere between 100, 115 kids over the course of the years. And I really leaned into and enjoyed the mentorship aspect of it. And I felt as though I was very good at my job. And I just love what I did. Many of the kids I keep in touch with to this day, they now have their own families. So that I feel is a testament to the great group of adults that I worked with to help us to mentor and provide encouragement and stability for some of the youth that, again, we continue to interact with. And so I knew that I did not want to keep working in the government system. Great health insurance, let me tell you, that was probably the best part about it. But I felt like I never really found my place. And it was around the time where I began to have a lot of challenges in terms of my lupus and having to take time off, having to be hospitalized for, costochondritis, swelling around my heart, and having to go into the hospital when my arms literally did not work. I couldn't move them to save my life. And I realized that I had to do something different. And at that particular point in time, it was during COVID that I was diagnosed. It was around COVID that I was diagnosed. And I had to really just do everything on my own because, of course, my husband wasn't allowed to go with me. So that gave me a lot of time to think, specifically, excuse me, when I was visiting all these different doctor's offices and trying to figure out what was going on with my body. And must admit that I didn't really get a lot of help. And there were times when I was directly turned away and it was like, no, not only can we not help you, there's no one that we can refer you to. And when you're dealing with three autoimmune conditions, bilateral breast cancer, a history of all the other issues that I had had with my body, it was hard. It was a challenge to finally muster the gumption to say, I need help and then be turned away. when I sought that help. So that is really how Prowl the LAB was born. Having to go to my oncologist and say, I'm having issues with my sexuality, I'm having issues with my sexual wellness and my relationship with my husband, and being referred to the clinic within the University of Chicago at the time that was set up for those specific issues, and to reach out and to be turned away. And I realize now, after speaking with them, that it was erroneously, but at the end of the day, that's what happened. And so I never wanted another woman to feel that way, Miss Gwendolyn. I never wanted another woman to feel as though her experience, especially the experiences that had a direct relationship with not just the quantity, but the quality of life. It was very important to me that I helped to support women that were kind of navigating the same path that I had, or that would potentially have to navigate that path in the future. So I took my master's in public health degree, and I took a deep dive into understanding different ways that I could better support not just myself, but other women and couples who were navigating disease status, trauma, and different ability, who felt as though their voices were not being heard in clinic. So it really was an example of your test turning into your testimony, so to speak, that's led me to where I am today. And I love what I do. I love my job.
Beautiful, beautiful. Right now, how would you describe your relationship to your body?
Inconsistent,
Mhm,
evolving,
mhm,
but grateful.
mhm.
You know, I've gone through a lot in terms of my body. I have scars, pretty much from kneecaps to shoulder blades. But this same body is what got me here today. It is this body that has sustained me, that has fought for me, even while it seemed though as though it was fighting against me. So I'm grateful for this body. I'm proud of her for everything that she's been able to come through and still hold us up, so to speak. So I appreciate her deeply.
Beautiful, beautiful. So tell us about Prowl the LAB. One of the things I noticed when I went to your website was
Mhm.
that you do like a very detailed sort of intake form for people to even enter into the conversation. And I was very impressed by that. And so
Thank you.
tell us a little bit about what you're doing there. What does prowling represent?
I named it Prowl the LAB because if you look at my logo, she is actually, I call her Miss Kitty, but she is a cat. And cats have always been very intriguing to me. I am a dog mom, but before I was a dog mom, I had three different cats. I've always had an affinity for both types of animals, but it's just always been something about the sensuality of cat-like movements, when women are at their most sensual, and when you see the sleekness, if you will, of some of the renderings of cat deities from different ancient civilizations, it always captivated. And it was always from the perspective of strength and spirituality and motherhood and love and the feminine divine. And so that is something that always stuck with me. So when I was speaking with my artist about the type of spirit that I wanted to embody, that feline, feminine type grace was something that was always present when I would give descriptions about what I wanted, not just the name or the likeness, but the organizational behavior of Prowl the LAB, what we wanted to embody. And it's that sensuality, it is that strength, it is the fact that cats have 9 lives. And as women, we have so many different roles as women, all rolled up into one, was something that was very meaningful to me. So I really wanted to embody that cat like persona. And so Miss Kitty became my logo. And what do cats do? They prowl. We slink and we slip and we dip and we dive and we enjoy and we revel all of these different things. And so Prowl the LAB embodies the very essence of what it is to be a woman, what it is to be sensual, what it is to be intelligent, to be strong, to be trusting. When we think about sexuality, a lot of the misinformation is that sexuality is only encapsulated or it's only illustrated throughout our sexual preferences. And that's not the case. Sexuality incorporates sexual wellness to a degree, but there are other functions of sexuality, such as how do you see yourself as a person? How do you identify within your personal and professional life? Also, how do you incorporate your relationships within your life into who you are as a person and how does that define you? So that's one of the reasons why Prowl the LAB is focused on 5 different areas of sexuality that come together to inform the entire person when it comes to developing confidence. When we talk about understanding, accepting, and exploring our sexuality individually and as a collective. And it is important that everyone be seen, be heard, and to feel celebrated. And so the main focus of Prowl the LAB is to support women and couples as they cultivate or as they maintain healthy sexuality throughout their cancer care, chronic illness, trauma related, or experiential relationship in terms of different abilities.
When you were talking about what it means to be a woman,
Mhm.
it reminded me of one of the women in the workshop who had had a double mastectomy.
Mhm.
And she was saying, I've lost everything that makes me a woman. And I recall saying to her, that's not true. You know, that the breasts are like the most external display of your essence
Mhm.
as a woman, but you are intuitive, you are sensual, you are caring, you're nurturing, you are maternal in some ways. And all of these things speak to your womanhood. And you didn't lose any of those things when you had the mastectomy.
That is true. But I can absolutely understand where she is coming from. Because if you think about it, your breasts are really the introduction of your womanhood to the world, not just to you, but to the world. You know how when we're going through puberty and we get our first bra, and of course, your boy crazy at some point. So when you realize your shape is starting to come in, that is where so much of the focus not only lands, but that it remains throughout the life of a woman. So
Mhm.
I felt similarly, to be honest with you. And I've been with my husband since we were in our late teens. So I would wonder, like, is my husband still going to love me? Will he still think I'm beautiful? Will he still feel as though I'm sexy in the way that I fill out my clothes? So that's that relationship that your body has with the significant other in your life. But then there's also the relationship that you have with your body. And cancer and lupus and diabetes and a lot of other conditions, they take and they take and they take and they take until your body, in some instances, it has no choice but to give and to give and to give until it seems and feels as though so many parts of you are depleted. So when you are experiencing something where your health is being threatened, you're facing your mortality, your breasts are taken away from you because you have to choose between what you consider to be your femininity and your life, and then you're supposed to accept all of this, be grateful that you were able to live through it, and then seemingly just go about your merry way. And that is in no way, shape, or form the way that it begins to shake out. So when your breasts are taken, Miss Gwendolyn, no, of course, that is not the only thing that defines you as a woman, but it served as one of the most concrete forms of your femininity ever since childhood.
Yeah, that's a very, very important point, and thank you for sharing that.
Oh, yes. I think that having these conversations is really important because there's no one way to internalize the challenges that you have once you hear those three words, you have cancer. And it really does cause you to almost tear yourself down to the skeletal form of who you are so that you're able to build yourself back up to successfully make it through this journey. You know,
Mhm.
I deal with health and sexuality because it's extremely important. But I have to admit, when I was looking for my oncologist, I wasn't looking for an oncologist that is, going to inform my sex life. That's not the first thing that came to mind. The first thing that came to mind is I need someone that is going who has the knowledge, the skill, and the expertise to help save my life. So
Exactly.
that is what is paramount. And so that's all you're thinking about. But as you go through those initial stages of diagnosis and treatment, you really are stripped down to the most basic part of who you are as a person, as a woman. And sometimes that's not done in a positive way.
Mhm.
And you really do have to build yourself back up again because you question, you know, is God mad at me? Did I do something in my life that I should not have done? Did I treat someone in a way that I should not have treated them? Why is it that I'm experiencing all of this? And we begin to break ourselves down because we must find some reason of why this happened, you know? And for many, the first thing that comes to mind is it's me. It's something that I did. I was deserving of this. And, one of the things that I tell the women that I work with is like, you did nothing wrong. You did absolutely nothing wrong. This is not a curse. This is not God being mad at you. There are many people who may not have cancer or who may not be dealing with adverse health status, but have many other challenges, if you will, that impact their ability to navigate life successfully. So we really have to sometimes take a moment and take a step back and realize that we are not our diagnosis. We are not the circumstances of our adverse health status. We are women. We are humans. And unfortunately, many of us have to navigate experiences that cause us to have face to face meetings with our mortality, sometimes before we're ready.
Yeah, very, very good point. You started talking a little bit earlier about the work of Prowl, and I understand that you focus on 5 circles of human sexuality. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. When I was creating Prowl the LAB, it was really important that the work that we're able to do was approached from an evidence based component. So, the framework that was most reflective of the messages that I think are so vital for women and couples are the 5 circles of sexuality that were created by Dr. Dennis Daly in the 1980s. And there are these 5 circles, please. They work together in a comprehensive way to create the whole person that is you, that looks back at you from the mirror every morning. And so the first circle is sensuality, and that is skin hunger, how you love to be touched, and the sensuality of your body and your personal feelings of being sexy and alluring. Then the second circle is intimacy, and that is your ability to trust, your ability to build relationships, and not just relationships with significant others in terms of sexual partners, but your relationships in terms of your friends, in terms of your family, your loved ones. And depending upon what you're navigating at any particular point in time, even your coworkers, employees, and employers. So yes, that intimacy has more grounding in the sexually intimate, if you will, relationships, but those are not the only relationships that inform who we are as people. The third circle is identity. And as this is not just about whether you identify as a man, as a woman, as transgender, as asexual or bisexual. It's how you identify yourself throughout the course of your life or the course of a phase in your life. And let me give you an example. There is a very knowledgeable woman by the name of Liz O'Royden, and she was a brilliant breast surgeon, and we can still consider her to be. However, she was diagnosed with breast cancer 3 times. And after the second time, she could no longer perform the duties of a surgeon, but she has been able to reframe and redefine herself as a very involved and dedicated educator of the challenges that women face with regard to treatment. And I mentioned her for a particular reason. When she and I were speaking, she spoke about how her identity pretty much crashed and burned after her second diagnosis. She had such an affinity for her profession as a surgeon. And that was how she defined herself as a woman, a wife, and a brilliant surgeon who had been wanting to do this ever since our version of high school. But then when that was taken away, it's like, who am I? What do I do now? So identity is very important, especially when you are discussing disease status. And when you're discussing disease status that is potentially terminal, it really does bring into question many of the values and the beliefs that you've carried throughout your life. The next circle is, or the fourth circle is human reproduction and sexual education. And that is what we know about sexual behaviors, what we know about the reproductive cycle, what we know about our bodies that inform how we are able to address the health challenges that arise through our lives and just evolving as a person. The last circle is sexualization. And sexualization refers to how you ingest the messages that we are bombarded with every day. Social media, traditional media, societal stereotypes, if you will. But it's also some of the darker aspects that can potentially shape our sexuality, like harassment, rape, incest. Sexualization is, of course, all of these circles are very important, but I find that sexualization in many cases has such a direct and detrimental impact on the evolution of someone's sexuality, specifically with reference to history of trauma, of different ability, and challenges with their sexual wellness within the grander scheme of healthy sexuality.
The Love Letters to Our Bodies podcast is sponsored by Moyo Institute Incorporated, a nonprofit organization offering heart-centered educational experiences, and the Lloyd Symington Foundation, which supports visionary grassroots cancer programs. Yeah, thank you so much for that. It really just really pivots me right into our next question, which is about how does one go about, or what does it mean to sort of reclaim your sexuality? I think that your point that you made about sexualization is so, so important because we are bombarded every single minute with sexual messages and sexual images as a part of advertising, say.
Mhm.
And so it's actually affecting the development of one's perspective about sex and sensuality and all of that from a very early age. So, yes, I'm really happy to know that the work you're doing is and focusing on that as well. So, what does it mean to reclaim sexuality when the body has been through trauma or illness?
Women, men, all of us as humans, as we are navigating adverse health status, it is going to impact your physical health, your mental health, your emotional health, your psychosexual health. And so it is extremely important that we have all of the resources that we can possibly require to remain as whole as we possibly can as we are navigating these situations. When the woman is diagnosed with cancer or a chronic illness or severe illness of any kind, it is incumbent upon not just the physician that is treating her or the individual that she is navigating a relationship with, but also we, as the patient, it is incumbent upon us that we all work in a collaborative manner. And the reason why is because when you are dealing with something like cancer, it is a stripping of everything that once gave you safety before that moment. And you oftentimes have to become comfortable with understanding that you will never be the person that you were prior to that diagnosis again. And when you are stuck in that type of suspended chaos, if you will, your body, your mind, your soul, Miss Gwendolyn, it can take a battering and it really can be combat. So, as those things, or when those things are potentially stripped away from you, you must rebuild your strength, your belief in yourself, so that you are able to reclaim your narrative. You may have cancer, but cancer does not have you. I may have lupus, but lupus does not have me. So I don't see reclaiming as necessarily the bare bones reestablishment, if you will, of everything all at once. When I speak to women about reclaiming their voice, it's about making sure that they understand that their voice never really went away to begin with.
Mhm.
You just have to look at what is in front of you, reframe what is in front of you to give yourself the best opportunity at success that you possibly can. And it's not easy. It's not easy because it does not matter what the diagnosis is. When you have to face your mortality and you have to face the person who you are now, it often makes you question the person that you used to be. And then you have to decide, who are you going to be as you move forward? Are you going to amplify your voice, or are you going to let your challenges silence you in an unhealthy manner? We all have to make that decision.
One of the things that we actually focus on in the Love Letters to Our Bodies workshops is the mind body spirit connection, and
Mhm.
really drawing attention to the fact that even before we're these bodies, we're something much larger and more expansive than that in terms of our spirit, essentially, and our consciousness, basically, that gave rise to these bodies to begin with. And sometimes just a little bit of refocusing in that way has been helpful to people. Sharing stories, for instance, of people who have had like a near-death experience and
Mhm.
discovered really more directly, more personally, what it means to be alive, what it means to be who they are, and how they show up in the life, how they have been showing up in the life, and what life is calling on them for right now. So it's really a beautiful experience of taking a little time to sort of recalibrate, so to speak, one's awareness. And it's very much in alignment with what you were just sharing.
I agree. And one of the things that I learned throughout this process is that there is so much potential for negativity, if you will. to seep into your experience that it is absolutely critical that we are able many times to take a step back and take that time to refocus, to reframe our situations so that we understand who we are and what we are able to do from a position of hope, from a position of resilience, and from a position of strength. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we are strong every moment of every day through every experience. It just means that through every experience, every day, and every situation, we show up the best way that we can so that we are able to navigate our circumstances, specifically when it comes to our relationship with our bodies as women. And as we evolve over the years and move and matriculate throughout life, it is so critical for us because I believe that there is a constant leveling, if you will, of our confidence when it comes to the standard of beauty and the standard of what's considered physical excellence within our society. And when you couple that with disease status, that is a very vulnerable place to be.
Agreed, agreed. So, in your work with couples, what advice do you give to couples when one partner is struggling with body acceptance?
The first thing that I tell women and couples is that there is nothing wrong and nothing to be ashamed of when it comes to seeking therapy. When someone is diagnosed and navigating cancer, it causes you to redefine your relationship with yourself. And in redefining that relationship with yourself, you're also having to redefine your relationship with your significant other. And so, one of the things that I impress upon couples is that the most important asset that you have at your disposal is or should be healthy communication. But it's not just healthy communication with each other, it's healthy communication with yourself. You have to be honest about how you're feeling. You have to be honest about whether or not you are willing and or able to share how you're feeling. And you have to be transparent about whether or not you are invested in those feelings changing for the better. So with couples, we also try to impress upon them that one is diagnosed for all intents and purpose, the partner is diagnosed as well. Because whether the relationship works out or whether it doesn't, once that diagnosis is given, everyone that is a part of the present circumstances is impacted by that diagnosis. So you have to be open with each other. You have to be honest with one another. And you have to give yourself and give one another grace.
Do you have any practical, simple practice recommendations for women who are just beginning to rebuild their relationship with their bodies? In your work that you do with
Mhm.
people, I think the recommendation for healthy communication is really important
Mhm.
and right on point. And it feels like part of the work is sort of behind a wall, so to speak, a wall of confidentiality, I'm sure. And so I'm just trying to penetrate that wall a little bit to see a little bit more about how you work with couples.
There are a couple of different ways that I approach the work that I do in terms of providing guidance for couples. And I just want to make sure that I make it clear that I don't work with couples independently by myself. Provide the information, we provide the resources, and we provide the access to the medical expertise so that they are able to navigate their individual journey with what they are experiencing. However, what I do say is that there are a couple of things that can be very beneficial to couples together and individually. One of them, in addition to open communication, seeking therapy, but also journaling. That is something that can be very important and beneficial because as negative emotions and as uncomfortable experiences take place, you're able to purge that negativity. You're able to discuss it in a safe space where your experiences are not ridiculed or devalued. You are able to move from a place of discomfort to greater ease because you're able to kind of break those chains of silence that I think encapsulate us when we are diagnosed with really serious conditions and when we are experiencing trauma or when we are navigating life with different ability. It's very important that we have a healthy mechanism of release for the emotions that we carry every day. So it's important that you have a mechanism to really purge. One of the other recommendations that I give husbands and wives and I give partners is remember a time or reflect upon that time when you first fell in love, when you first embarked upon this relationship where there was so much joy, when regardless of what was going on with your day, just seeing one another was enough to spur your feelings of joy and happiness and return to the little things, whether it's a post-it note on the refrigerator, I hope you have a good day, to a sexy text message in the middle of the day, whatever it may be. Find the little thing that can have huge potential in your relationship because it's the little simplistic things that have the greatest impact and show the greatest authenticity. I also recommend that couples have fun throughout this process from diagnosis through survivorship. There are going to be so many peaks and so many valleys. It is important to laugh, to have fun, to learn different mechanisms or different methods of intimacy when and if that physical intimacy is taken off of the table. And if it is, it's time for one of those honest conversations when it's about that sexual wellness negotiation, if you will. This is something that we're no longer able to do, but I'm open to at least exploring this so that we are able to not just have fun, but really feed the connection that has developed into such a beautiful relationship to begin with. And the last thing, that I advise the couples that I work with is to have self compassion, to give yourself and to give one another grace. Because I don't care how many self help books are out here floating around with the person that you are personally navigating this situation with in partnership is unique to anything else that is out here and that is in your orbit. So it's really important that you nurture the individuality of you and your partner's experience. But in order to do those things, you have to give yourself grace in the hard moments. You have to be compassionate with yourself, and you have to be compassionate with one another, because navigating adverse health status in itself can be a detriment to your mental, emotional, as well as your physical health and well being.
Wow, this is really, really quite beautiful, quite comprehensive. And I know that our listeners who hear this will find some really inspiring nuggets to take away and to apply in their own journeys. And I want to acknowledge and appreciate you for being here today. And I want to ask you if you could write a love letter to your body right now, what would the opening line be?
Ooh, girl, we made it this far. We did it
Beautiful.
far.
Tell me about the event coming up this fall
Mhm.
in Chicago.
So this October, National Breast Cancer Awareness Month, we will have Prowl the LAB will have its first in-person major event, and it is called the Sweetest Steps to Wellness. And what this is a couples event in Chicago where at least 20 couples will have an amazing date night where, yes, we are there for health related reasons, but we're also there to nourish and nurture the connection between partners and have them to hold each other and themselves accountable for the health choices that they make so that they can have an enduring, loving, and lasting relationship. So it is in partnership with Northwestern University and the University of Chicago. And not only do we want to impress upon our participants how beautiful and just splendid, nurturing your relationship while also owning the fact that we both play a critical role in ensuring our collective health. Because as we stated before, when one person's diagnosed, so too is that other individual. So within the Sweetest Steps to Wellness, which is on Sweetest Day, we will have women assess their breast cancer and their cervical cancer risk. And we will have our gentlemen to assess their colorectal and prostate cancer risk. That being said, we also know that colorectal cancer is a huge issue among African American women as well. So they will also have the opportunity to assess their colorectal cancer risk during the event. So once we educate our participants about their cancer risk, that's when researchers from the University of Chicago and Northwestern University will be able to present their research and their findings and really have a candid conversation with community members in Black and Brown communities about why it is so critical that more of us participate in clinical trials and medical research so that we have the data that is available to inform practitioners how to treat Black and Brown communities who experience cancer diagnoses and cancer related treatments, in many cases, very differently. That night, we also have our interactive period where couples are able to win dinner dates. We have a couple of jewelers who have donated items for individual winners, if you will, within some of our interactive activities. And we also partner with an adult store in Chicago because, of course, even though sexual wellness is only one component of healthy sexuality, it's a very important component. Sex and sexual wellness is a basic human right. We want to make sure that we encourage couples to continue to explore and continue to expand and have fun. And, it is the sweetest steps to wellness. I'm so excited about it because it just embodies the spirit of what Prowl the LAB is all about. And it's cultivating those connections, even in hardship, and really understanding the beauty that can be found even in some of the most tragic and challenging circumstances.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much. I know
Absolutely.
the event is going to be a stellar success.
I
And
can't.
also, I love the fact that you've planned it in such a way that's very creative and very expansive in terms of the focus. And I'm sure that the couples who participate will enjoy it greatly and benefit greatly from it as well.
This is an amazing event that we've been planning diligently and that I am just so excited and looking forward to.
One final question before you go, Ebonie. Does Prowl the LAB also work with practitioners who are supporting couples going through cancer?
Not only does Prowl the LAB work with women and couples to help them to establish or maintain healthy sexuality, what Prowl the LAB also does is we work with practitioners to provide training and guidance for how to have these conversations in clinic and how sexual wellness and other components of healthy sexuality can be incorporated into a wellness plan from diagnosis all the way through survivorship.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for being with us today. And we'll keep our eye open for Prowl the LAB and follow what you're doing and do our best to help share the information with others as well.
I appreciate. Thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this conversation, Miss Gwendolyn. So I can't wait for our next conversation when I have you on my podcast because we're gonna have a whole different conversation, and I can't wait. We're gonna have
Beautiful.
fun. We are.
Beautiful, beautiful. So we'll put information in the show notes on how our listeners can be in touch with you and give them your website and your podcast link and everything, and your LinkedIn link as well. That's a wrap. Thank you so much for listening to Love Letters to Our Bodies, conversations on health, healing, and happiness. To find out more about the Love Letters to Our Bodies project, visit our website at moyoinstitute.org. That's MOYO Institute.org. Follow us on social media and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. If there are topics you'd like for us to discuss, let us know. Remember, your body is beautiful, girlfriend. Love it.